U.S. President Donald Trump is lashing out at NATO allies, calling them cowards, claiming the alliance would be a paper tiger without the U.S. The comments come as Canada says it's ready to help protect the Strait of Hormuz. That's according to a joint statement signed by Canada and 6 other allies. It says we express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait. We welcome the commitment of nations who are engaging in preparatory planning. It's not quite clear what Canada's contributions could entail, but for more on this, I'm joined now by former Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole. Nice to see you, Erin. Thanks for coming on.
Good to join you, JP.
So I want to start with President Trump and his latest broadside against NATO allies. He says countries like Canada are cowards for not helping reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What's your reaction when you hear that sort of rhetoric coming from the White House?
You know, I hate that rhetoric, JP. I'll be very blunt. And it shows, once again, with the president, a profound misunderstanding of what alliances are for and how you engage in multilateral action. He acted unilaterally with respect to Iran and was not well briefed, clearly, because I think the success of the Venezuela operation perhaps gave the administration an impression that they'd be able to dispense with the regime in Iran just as quickly, not understanding that the drone capabilities, which has really helped Russia be propped up during the Ukraine war over the last 4 years, made Iran a very different adversary. And so I think if Canada, along with some other NATO allies, are going to try and help global commerce by straightening out the situation in the Strait of Hormuz or opening up the important energy sort of point it is in the world, that's different. But, you know, the president is in a bit of a quagmire because of his unilateral action, and I think that can't be forgotten.
The NATO alliance, of course, has faced severe strain, I guess we could say, over the last several months, right? When you look at the Greenland crisis, which really put allies in a bind, now there's this Trump claim that he can't really count on NATO anymore. Do you think that this alliance can survive what is turning out to be a very, very tumultuous period?
Yes, I do, JP. The question will be, does it survive with the U.S. as a fundamental part of the alliance? Canada was actually, with Louis Saint Laurent in particular, Canada was a linchpin in the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. The U.S. was always going to backstop European security and support amidst the rising Cold War. Canada helped bridge that. Now, if NATO is going to have to do more without the United States, you're seeing Canada and a lot of our European allies quickly getting our defense spending up to where it should be. You may recall, JP, a number of us, myself included, wanted us to spend our 2%, wanted us to show relevance within the alliance years ago. But nevertheless, the question really is, will the U.S. be continuing in its multilateral tradition? It seems like the Trump presidency is acting unilaterally, both in the Americas and now in the Gulf. We have to make sure that NATO can approach this in a way that looks at stability of global commerce, very similar to way back when the Suez crisis led Lester Pearson to work with what became a UN action with respect to trade in the Suez. So there have been multilateral efforts like this to stabilize global trade, and I think Canada has a role. It would be a smaller one, but I think it's an important symbol in a multilateral effort for Canada to be there.
Yeah, well, on that point, as we discussed, you know, Trump talking down NATO, but there are signs that Canada may actually do something now to deal with the economic troubles that have come about as a result of the Strait of Hormuz being blocked. We've heard from the UK, we've heard from France, we've heard from Germany. They're kind of working collectively on this, and they say that there is a readiness to do something to ensure the safe passage of tankers through that strait. What do you think Canada can do? You say it might be a small role, but what do you think is a possibility for us here?
Well, you mentioned two key countries, JP, both the United Kingdom and France, who are our founding allies in many ways. Both have aircraft carrier capacity. So if they could, and the French have been redirecting its Charles de Gaulle class to the region, they could be the underpinnings of a multilateral task force, a multi-nation task force that Canada could send a frigate or some sort of naval support to. We also have the ability to have maritime patrol aircraft, the Aurora, repositioned to Italy to help sort of track in the region of the Strait. So there's a number of things we could do, but I do think France and the UK, those would be critical countries given the fact that they have aircraft carrier capacity.
I spoke to retired Lieutenant General Andrew Leslie. I know you know him well. And he said that Canada should really stay far, far away from this conflict. He doesn't want to see our sailors, our warships become in trouble, and the Americans and Trump, he says we really can't count on them to come back us up if things go awry. Do you think he's onto something there? Do you share those concerns? Is it safe for Canada to get involved militarily at all in this conflict? Obviously, it would be more in a defensive position or a coordination role. Do you think it's safe for us to get involved with Trump leading this war effort?
Well, I disagree slightly with General Leslie. I think there is a role for Canada, but let me be clear. I don't feel it's under American command, JP. What I really think this could be is a multi-nation, maybe call it NATO adjacent task group to help stabilize the strait. As Katie said in her report, 25% of global sea trade in oil goes through that pinch point. 20% of global LNG because of the importance of Qatar and the UAE. So it is going to impact the global economy. It already is. We're seeing that at the pumps. So Canada could play a role alongside our allies in providing stability without actually getting any active role in the American objective in Iran. So this could be done as a task group adjacent to NATO or within NATO without being part of an American coalition here. And I do think we have the capability of doing this in a way where our men and women are safe. We deploy assets that could be very helpful for maritime surveillance and interdiction. But as I said at the outset, it would be key to have that sort of underpinned with an aircraft carrier asset, either French or the UK. So Canada has a role. We're never aggressive, but we have a role in playing a substantial role alongside our allies. And I think we can do that with a naval ship and perhaps Aurora aircraft providing surveillance for the area.
Yeah, I think Emmanuel Macron, the French president, suggested today something like that might actually be in the works. So, as always, you're on the ball, Mr. O'Toole. Let's talk about the politics of this, because Defense Minister David McGuinty was on this program earlier this week, and he told me, Canada wasn't involved in this war at all. We weren't told about it in advance. We played no role in planning. We do not intend to get involved in an offensive position militarily at all. There's no interest, really, here in Ottawa to participate. Obviously, what you're describing and what others are describing is something quite different, but just being even attached to this conflict might be a problem, really, for the Liberals, given some of the backlash we've seen from inside their own caucus, frankly, when Carney came out initially to support the airstrikes against the Iranian nuclear program. What do you think the government is grappling with as they decide on something like this, as they rack their brains over how we could participate in a conflict like this?
Well, you've nailed the challenge here. There is clearly a political dynamic, and the Prime Minister's own messaging has evolved, you might say, on this issue. But I think we have to deal with the realpolitik of this, which is the Americans acted, and they're having a continued engagement alongside Israel vis-a-vis Iran. The ripple effect is what the other allies are looking at calming down, which is maintaining a level of stability in critical global commerce. And we're such an interconnected world, we're already seeing the impact of the strait being tied up. So I think in many ways it would be similar to the Suez crisis. We weren't looking at the exact same circumstances, but there could be a multi-nation initiative for stability that has nothing to do with the actual mission in Iran. Nobody is losing sleep over the fact a terrible regime is being addressed and potentially replaced in that country. But I do think the U.S. acting unilaterally, acting so quickly off of a very different mission in Venezuela, was not well considered. And even though the adversary is a terrible one in Iran, this is something that could be a prolonged, lingering war or engagement. So, how can we support stability, global trade, in a way that doesn't have us involved in that mission? That's going to be the tightrope the Prime Minister has to walk. And at a time where Canada is trying to show NATO is relevant, multilateralism is relevant, that we're going to pick up a rifle or pay our fair share type thing in multilateral efforts, I think it's important for Canada to show our days as a free rider are over. So I do think the Prime Minister's intention here is sound. How he articulates it to Canadians will be the political test.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. Nice to see you, Erin. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, JP.